As some of you might be aware, life can be a bit of a bitch sometimes. And sometimes you just want to watch a movie that allows you to turn your brain off, not think for a little while, and relax. If that's what you're looking for, then Godzilla X Kong is the perfect movie for you. But say you're looking for a movie with an actually good storyline, maybe some interesting characters, or some plot development, then you might want to skip this one. Now don't get me wrong, I'm fully aware that this movie is supposed to be some absolute nonsense with monsters punching other monsters in the face. If that's the direction you want to run with, fucking do it. Focus on the monsters. Focus on them beating the shit out of each other. Don't waste half your movie's runtime on a group of people who mean nothing to anything, or they're just there for some sort of plot convenience. This movie follows 3 separate storylines that are all supposed to interconnect by the end of the movie for the big final showdown, but trying to follow along with it is absolutely insane. You go from Kong to people to Kong to Godzilla, back to people, back to Kong, back to Godzilla, back to people, back to Kong. It's nonsense. The whole fucking movie is like this. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this absolute shit show.
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
So the movie kicks off in Hollow Earth, everyone's favorite place that makes absolutely no fucking sense. And we see Kong being chased by a pack of what I can only describe as wolf rats. Kong then leads them into a crevice in between 2 mountains that he could have just climbed but decided not to. And it turns out he had some traps laid out and he kills most of them.
You fell victim to one of the classic blunders!
With only 3 remaining, he decides to pick up one of their dead bodies that magically teleported behind him, rips it apart over his head, and then screams at them until they run away. We then cut to him taking a shower and having dinner because he's a person now, I guess. And then off in the distance he hears a roar that sounds a lot like his. He gets excited, chases after it, and turns out it's just some stupid inflatable frog that happens to mimic his roar. So in his disappointment, he plops his fat ass on the ground, pouts for a little while, and holds his mouth because apparently he has a toothache. We then get to the opening credits that show us multiple newsreels explaining the entire point of this entire movie. It's that Kong wants friends and a family, while Godzilla just absolutely hates every other fucking monster and wants to be the last one standing. We then cut over to Godzilla, who's fighting a giant snow crab in a city for some reason, which I was surprised. Monster fight in the first 10 minutes of this fucking movie, but it does only last for about 20 seconds, and then he lasers it in the face and the fight's over. Then we go back to the pile of dead wolf rats, and a hole just so happens to open up right fucking there. I'm sure this will be very important to the movie. So then we get to see a group of scientists hanging out in Hollow Earth, and all their equipment starts going a little wonky, showing pictures of triangles. But the scientists aren't the only ones that are getting this signal now. We then switch over to the little girl from the last movie, whom you might remember, that speaks to Kong, the walking checkbox of diversity, because she's both indigenous and a mute. And because nobody in this movie makes any impact, I couldn't even bother to remember her fucking name, so for argument's sake, I'm just gonna call her Tribal Jesus. That'll make sense later. So Tribal Jesus is hanging out in Mute Kid School, and apparently she's psychic, I guess, or something, because she starts zoning the fuck out and having visions of triangles and other weird shit. Her teacher then snaps her the fuck out of it, and apparently she was drawing the triangles all over her fucking desk. This is when we're introduced to our protagonist, Science Lady. Science Lady then asks Tribal Jesus what the fuck her problem is, and of course she has no idea. So then we get a nice scenic shot of a Volkswagen vehicle for product placement, and then we go back to their house. Science Lady's hanging out on the couch watching old exposition videos of Tribal Jesus' family and where she comes from, just so we know for future reference. Tribal Jesus then has another vision, but this time it's of Scar King, the bad monster of the movie. And Science Lady decides that she needs to go find some help. Who does she get help from? The annoying podcast guy from the last movie. The guy whose only purpose is to answer questions that don't actually have answers and to give exposition of everything happening. So after watching an incredibly annoying scene of them interacting with each other, we then see that Kong is now escaping Hollow Earth and pops up on the surface because he needs to go see a dentist. No, I'm not fucking kidding. He literally popped out of the ground to go to the fucking dentist.
The next step to be performed by a dentist, which I am, is to glue the foot to the soft palate. Next, we take a black marker and draw a funny mustache on the patient's face.
So then we get introduced to the dentist in possibly the cringiest way possible, of him lip-syncing to some sort of seductive song while hanging from a flying machine and then rappelling down some cables into Kong's mouth where he rips out his tooth and replaces it with a new one. This goes absolutely nowhere. Then him and Science Lady meet up on the beach to have some exposition about how they used to date. This also goes absolutely fucking nowhere. Then another signal of triangles comes in, and Podcast Man gives us some bullshit science, thinking that they're coming from Hollow Earth. So Science Lady decides she needs to put a team together and go investigate. So who's a part of this team? You got Science Lady, Podcast Guy, the fucking dentist, the pilot, and then for some fucking reason they decide to let Tribal Jesus come along. Because bringing a fucking child into the most dangerous place on the planet, not the worst idea, I guess. Fuck it. Kong also seems to be alerted by this signal, so he jumps into the portal, followed by the team into a scene that I could only assume caused many seizures across the world. But it turns out Godzilla also gets alerted of this signal, and he fucks off to France, and he starts absorbing a nuclear power plant for energy. Seems he's powering up for something important. So the team splits off from Kong to go find the science base in Hollow Earth, only to find it's been destroyed. Meanwhile, Kong goes back to his hidey cave, where he picks up his axe and goes to find the hole that opened up in the ground. To his surprise, he finds a bunch of giant ape skulls, and then wanders outside to get this shit, another Hollow Earth. Yes, there is another Hollow Earth inside of Hollow Earth. They call it the Subterranean Realm. Just when you thought this shit couldn't possibly get more retarded, we got an Earth inside of Earth inside of Earth. So after walking around for about 2 seconds, he comes across a merchandising opportunity, a little baby Kong. And little baby Kong decides that he's going to introduce Big Kong into gang violence. That's right, he tricked Kong into getting jumped by 3 other giant apes. And this is where we get the greatest scene of the entire movie. Kong literally picks up the baby monkey by the leg and uses it as a fucking nunchuck to beat the shit out of the other ones. Needless to say, Kong wins and he forces Baby Monkey to lead him to the other apes. Now back to our people yet again, and another signal pops up. But this time, Tribal Jesus just so happens to know the location of where it's coming from. So they land and they figure that the signal's coming from about 2 miles away. Why they didn't just land closer, I have no fucking idea. But they go on their little walk through the woods. While walking through the woods, the pilot decides he's going to be a dickhead and immediately gets eaten by a tree. Everyone panics for about 3 whole seconds, and then they get over it pretty fucking quickly. Then we briefly jump back to Godzilla on his worldwide tour. This time he's in Spain, and then he fucks off into the ocean. The people tracking him give us a video game introduction of this monster named Tiamat that he's heading towards, and then they provide us with solid exposition that this monster happens to be the largest source of power on the planet. And then we immediately go back to our people on their little jungle hike. And wouldn't you know it, they come across some human ruins. Turns out it comes from the same people that Tribal Jesus comes from. What the fuck are the odds of this shit? After dicking around for a couple seconds, they discover a weird fleshy wall thing, so she plunges her fists into the goo wall and rips it open, and wouldn't you know it, it's another fucking entrance to the hollow Earth. And there on the horizon happens to be 3 giant fucking triangles. They're pyramids. And then we immediately go back to Kong on his adventure. Little baby monkey decides to lure him into a trap where he gets attacked by a giant water snake. He fights it for about 10 seconds and then kills it off screen. Then we go back to Godzilla and he ends up finding Tiamat, who also happens to be a water snake, fights it for about 20 seconds and then kills it off screen. So glad we came to a monster movie to watch things die off screen. Then back to our people for more boring bullshit. They get ambushed by some tribal folks and then brought to the pyramids. Turns out none of these people could speak, they're all telepathic. But our main cast of people somehow know every single thing that's happening. And as it turns out, the tribal people were the ones sending out the signal because they knew about all this apocalyptic bullshit was coming their way. We get a quick cut back to Kong, who just ends up in Lava Land, and apparently that's where all the apes are, and then immediately go back to the people, where the tribal folks are now introducing our main cast to this premonition on a fucking wall, which just kind of looks like fucking doodles of a child. But Science Lady goes into this great length of detail about this fucking prophecy, and the most important part of it apparently is that Godzilla was the one who kicked Scar King's ass and then trapped all the apes in the hollow Earth. And we hop back to Kong yet again, and he found all the apes. Turns out they're all enslaved by Scar King. I don't know what they're doing, it just looks like they're kind of pushing rocks in aimless directions, but whatever, fuck it. Kong decides he's gonna step in after he sees a guard push down one of the other apes, and then Scar King comes out to bitch slap Kong around a little bit. Kong starts to get the upper hand, and then that's when Scar King pulls out his secret weapon. Some sort of ancient ice lizard monster that he has control over with a crystal that's never explained, but he uses the ice monster to freeze Kong's arm. Kong freaks out and runs away. So back to the people and their bullshit prophecy. It ends specifically stating that fucking Tribal Jesus that's been hanging around the whole time is going to summon Mothra and bring peace to the world and stop Scar King. Holy fuck, is this retarded? Then we quickly jump to Godzilla, who's emerging from Tiamat's cave, and now he's all pink and powerful, even though he basically seems exactly the same, he's just more feminine. So Kong meets up with the people. He found them because apparently he's psychic linked with Tribal Jesus somehow, and immediately Dentist Man realizes he has frostbite on his arm. So then he suggests that they just so happen to have built a giant gauntlet for him, that just so happens to be nearby, that just so happens to be for that specific arm, and just so happens to have the ability to cure fucking frostbite. What the fuck are the odds? So we get a ridiculous montage scene of him putting this thing on, almost like watching Iron Man suit up.
We've made some minor augmentations.
Oh.
Then Tribal Jesus tells Kong we need more help, and immediately he goes to the surface to try to find Godzilla. Kong emerges in Egypt while Godzilla's hanging out in Gibraltar because we haven't had enough scenic shots of different countries, and then they just kind of yell at each other from over the ocean.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you! Fuck you!
Tribal Jesus then goes to the top of the pyramid where she just sticks her hand out, and all of a sudden Mothra gets shit out of thin air. Mothra picks up Tribal Jesus and takes her to the surface. Then we get a brief moment of what we all wanted to see. Kong fighting Godzilla, but this time they're both superpowered. This fight actually lasts about maybe a minute and a half, ends with like a suplex and some laser beams, and then right when Godzilla's about to fucking murder the shit out of Kong, Mothra pops up out of nowhere and just decides, hey, let's work together. And they're like, alright, cool. And then they all fuck off down to Hollow Earth. This is where Scar King shows up riding on Ice Lizard with a couple extra apes to help. And the tribal people are trying to do some bullshit science to make gravity stop working. I don't know, it doesn't make any fucking sense at all. So then our team of heroes decide that they need a distraction. And Dentist Man all of a sudden knows how to pilot the ship, he fucks off, and then comes back with a bunch of electric pigeons. How the fuck he brought them along, how he knew where they were, or got them to come help out, I have no fucking idea. So once all the electric pigeons disappear, Kong and Godzilla come crashing down into Hollow Earth. They break out of the ground and they start charging at Scar King, looking like some sort of bullshit Marvel superhero team-up movie. And then this is really where shit just goes sideways. Both teams are charging directly at each other, and then the apes jump into the air, and when all four of them are about to collide, the fucking gravity pyramids collide, and all of a sudden, gravity's just gone. Fuck it, gravity's gone, and now they're all fighting in zero gravity. Somehow these fuckers are jumping off of boulders all over the place, they're floating through midair, they're having zero trouble with this fight, they are not having any problems acclimating. And while all this bullshit's going on, the whole time the camera is just spinning in a fucking spiral, and you're gonna get nauseous.
We're gonna die! We're gonna die! I'm going to throw up, and then I'm gonna die!
After watching this nonsense for a couple minutes, gravity kicks back on, and they all just so happen to fall directly into the portal leading to the surface. Now instead of coming out of the ground in Egypt, they come out in fucking Brazil, and for some reason Scar King and his pet ice monster come out first, and he uses the ice monster to block out the sun, because he wants to start a new ice age. Now this fight was actually pretty cool for the most part. It was just absolute nonsense of beating the fuck out of each other. For some reason, Godzilla can't hit a goddamn thing with his laser beam because he can only turn his head at 1 mile per hour. But needless to say, it's entertaining. But while this whole fight's going on, they are killing like millions of people. Like they're just trouncing through this fucking city, annihilating everything. And it's never brought up once. Like I'm pretty sure everybody in Brazil is just dead. So it gets towards the end of the fight and Kong looks like he's pretty fucked, but then all of a sudden Baby Monkey shows up with Kong's axe and destroys the crystal that was controlling Ice Monster. With Ice Monster free, him, Kong, and Godzilla all team up on Scar King, beat the shit out of him, turn him into a popsicle, and then smash him on the ground. Godzilla unleashes a victory beam to the sky because none of these movies are complete without a fucking glowing sky beam, and he unblocks the sun. Then we get a cheesy scene of them smiling and nodding to each other.
I just wanted to say thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.
Yeah, that was badass. Fuck you, movie. So they go their separate ways, Godzilla goes back to sleep in Rome, and Kong decides to return to the apes to free them along with his new pet pony, the Ice Monster. And then the people are fine, no one gives a shit, they just fuck off and everything's back to normal for them. So that's it. That's the whole fucking movie. That's all the nonsense. If you thought that was hard to follow, just try watching this shit, it's even worse. Now the good qualities I could say about this movie, most of the CGI, pretty awesome. Some of the action, pretty awesome. It's got good songs, but it was used in horrible fucking ways. Honestly, there's really not too much I could say that was good about this movie. It was absolutely fucking stupid. All the character nonsense in this movie was fucking just pointless. You got one person in this movie that could actually kind of act, and they use her for nothing. The little girl in the movie, I don't know why, she just, every time you look at her face, it looks like either she's staring into the sun, or if she smells a dead carcass. That's the only facial expression she has, and it's the only one you'll ever see. For some reason, turning the monsters into more human-like things was fucking ridiculous. No one wants to see Kong shower or going to the fucking dentist. No one wants to see Godzilla smiling and nodding. He's a fucking monster. I want to see him destroy shit.
Monster.
Human.
Monster.
I am not a monster.
You are a monster.
I'm a human.
The only reason Godzilla -1 got away with so much people shit was because it had a good story. This is not a good story. This was just fucking nonsense. Like, every time Godzilla moved somewhere, we could have figured out just by watching it that he was going to get more power. We didn't need someone to fucking say it every 3 seconds. And the anti-gravity bullshit, we didn't need any science behind that. How the dude even knew the science behind it makes no fucking sense. The leader of the tribal people just made some vague hand gestures and he was like, oh, okay, let me explain everything that this woman just said in 3 minutes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I believe I know what you are saying.
We could have just left it alone and just assumed it was some magic bullshit. We didn't need an answer. Fuck it. But of course, nowadays, everyone at Warner Brothers thinks that all the audience members are fucking retards or children, so they have to hold your hand and explain every little detail so you don't have to use your imagination. You don't have to think. And then throughout the film, you'll also notice that there's a bunch of just like random-ass cartoony fucking sound effects, or there'll be something that happens that's supposed to be like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, like someone getting bonked on the head and they fall over with their tongue hanging out. Clearly, this is not for adults. I don't know why the fuck they made it PG-13. Every time something bleeds, it's just this green goo shit. That's it. That's all I got. This took entirely too much effort. My brain has turned to absolute pudding just from watching this movie twice and then trying to relive it by explaining it to you guys. So hopefully you at least were entertained by it. With that being said, I appreciate the hell out of all of you guys. Thank you for all your support. Feel free to like and subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what movie you'd like me to review next. I'll see you guys on the next one.